Okay, before we get started, I just want to tell everyone about a new book that was launched by State Bar of Wisconsin Pinnacle called Reduce Your Risk, a Guide to Personal Safety and Security for the Legal Community. The book is designed to help lawyers, judges, and others in the legal community better recognize the potential for violence and implement measures to prevent it. To learn more, go to the State Bar of Wisconsin Marketplace at wisbar.org.
Welcome to Bottom Up, a monthly podcast dedicated to issues and topics of interest to young lawyers in Wisconsin and beyond. I'm Emil Ovviagele.
And I'm Kristen Hardy, and we're your hosts. This is the Bottom Up Podcast.
What's going on, Emil?
I'm good. How's it going, Joe?
Pretty good.
You don't sound like Kristen, though.
No, Kristen couldn't make it this time, so
I'm
duty calls.
joking. Hey, it's always a pleasure to have the man behind the show and whose brainchild and whose shoulders we stand on here today to co-host this. So I'm actually happy to have you co-host it today.
You're too kind. Thanks, Emil.
So we're broadcasting this episode from the Kalahari. I can never pronounce that. Is it Kalahari?
Kalahari, yeah.
Yeah, from the Kalahari Wisconsin Solo Small Firm Conference.
And I will say, speaking of Kristen, I wanted to give a shout out to her. She recently won the Jackie Hurd Barber Award.
That's the only thing she won.
It's the inaugural. She was the inaugural recipient of the Greater Milwaukee Foundation's Jackie Hurd Barber Award. The award recognizes community ambassador and advisor network members who help build and deepen relationships with the foundation and champion the foundation's strategic vision of building a Milwaukee for all. It is named after Jackie Hurd Barber, a past foundation board chair and community volunteer.
So, fun fact, not only is that amazing, but Kristen, the day she got that award, I was there at the event. She actually received 2 awards and had 2 award ceremonies at the same time. I believe she also received another award from the Association of Women Lawyers. And so I had gotten an invitation to both of them. So I went to the first one, the Association of Women Lawyers, and I'm like, where's Kristen? And I was like, oh, she's at the other award. And so I had to go across town.
Yeah.
But it's pretty amazing. And I think it's a testament to just her work, her impact. She's been very bullish about uplifting the voices of those who aren't oftentimes heard across the various spheres that she works in, and she's been very intentional about that throughout her career. So it's really amazing to see that happen. So it's just an acknowledgement of things that we already know. She's awesome.
Absolutely. Let's give it up for Kristen.
Woo-woo. Oh, that's dope.
You like that?
We have that sound effects. It's over. Someone better get this mic off. Can we have the mixer on here so we can actually select them?
Speaking of awards, though, Emil, we just heard the presentation for the 2023 John Lederer Service Award received by you, Emil. The Lederer Award recognizes those focused on improving the lives and practices of solo and small firm attorneys in Wisconsin. The award is given annually to an individual, group, or organization that exhibits the leadership, spirit, and dedication of the late John Lederer of Oregon, Wisconsin. Emil, let's give it up for you.
Cool. That's what I like. The first one better though.
No, but
Peter's having fun with that.
In all seriousness, Emil, you're so deserving of the award. You do so much for so many people, and I really appreciate you co-hosting this podcast with Kristen. And the discussions have been so great. And your speech at the award ceremony was really inspiring and uplifting. And I thought maybe you could tell people about what your message was and your theme in that particular speech, because it was so powerful.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot. It was it came as a surprise when I was told. I was on my way to London. I believe it was about 3-4 weeks ago, and I get this call, and I was told I was going to be a recipient of the award, and I felt very honored, and I had all these feelings because partly I'd also started drinking on my way to London at the airport, and so I'm like, am I remembering this right? Is this happening to me, or am I imagining this? No, but it was truly an honor. It was a very special moment, and for me, it was Just a reminder that I think I strongly believe that our most important duties as human beings and as professionals is to pour back into the world more than we take out of it, is to be of service. And beyond just our immediate circles, being of service and impacting the lives of our family members and our closest of friends, well, I mean, that's expected, right? That's the bare minimum in my opinion. But going above and beyond those confines and reaching lives and just doing it and putting that type of energy in the world, because that's what we ought to do. I believe that's the ultimate goal, and that's what I've tried to do, and I keep doing it. And we don't do it for the awards; we do it because it's a way of life. And so I intend to continue to be that for lots of people, law school students, lawyers of color, immigrant lawyers, or people just trying to figure out their own spaces and find themselves within our profession. And also having the award being presented at the Solo Small Firm Conference also has a special place in my heart, given the fact that I've always been vocal. I think that solos, and I know that solos and small firms are the backbones of our legal profession and of the state bar. And I know that sometimes people, maybe not solos and small firm lawyers themselves, maybe are perceived as maybe not having as much of an impact. But my speech was focused on dispelling that. I believe that impact has nothing to do with the size of the firm that you're at. It has nothing to do with your age. It has nothing to do with the color of your skin. It has nothing to do with your gender. It has everything to do with going out there and putting mind to purpose and just changing lives and changing circumstances. And the men and women who hold themselves out as solopreneurs or small law firm attorneys do that every day. They're touching lives and they're changing lives in ways that I believe deserve recognition. So I'm honored.
That's awesome, Emil. Well, today we are at the Solo and Small Firm Conference, recording from there. We're going to have some guests.
Kalahari. Okay.
We're going to have some guests who are actually very involved in the planning of this event,
yes.
Including Jessica Kramer, Aaron Ogden, Aiden Tharp, and Brent Heft. I'm going to have to ask Brent if I got that right. Brent Heft, who is our new Practice 411 practice management advisor at the State Bar of Wisconsin. He just started last week, and he knows a ton about technology. So we'll talk a little bit with him. But before we bring on our first guest, I did want to ask you, when you were in law school, or immediately after law school, starting practice, would you ever have thought that you would be someone who would be receiving this award?
No. Because obviously in law school and right after law school, you're so focused on just trying to get a job, trying to make it through the semester. You're very focused on you, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's a time for everything, but as you're focused on you and you're trying to take the next best step or trying to climb the rungs, you end up realizing that the people who help you get there are people who aren't just focused on themselves, but also focused in you. And if you climb the rungs that way and you see the people are giving and putting back into you, the best way and the only way to repay that is to ensure that as you go forth, that you start pouring into others. And so I just, my impact, to the extent that I have had any impact, it's been inspired by those who have impacted my lives. The mentors and older lawyers who picked up my calls despite having no reasons whatsoever to be bothered by my emails, asking them to meet probably dead in the middle of a very busy, hectic schedule, right? And that's one thing I think we're blessed to have in Wisconsin and within our state bar. I have never been in a situation where I've not been able to call somebody who's more experienced or who has some knowledge to gain to offer, who hasn't picked up my call or offer to assist when assistance is needed. And so that's always been very inspiring, and I can name so many names of people who've been that for me and continue to do that for me till this day. And I think that's what really makes the profession tick, and that's where I draw my inspiration from. So again, we just do it on a daily basis, not focused on the award or thinking about if we're going to get awarded for it. But it is nice to be recognized.
Yeah. Well, it's clear you're giving back now, and it's really really cool to see. Emil, should we bring on our first guest?
Yes, but before we bring on our first guest, I think we should talk about what the theme for this year's conference. I believe the theme was working across generations in the legal industry for the best outcomes. And obviously in a profession as dynamic as law, where experience oftentimes meets innovation, it's inevitable for generational differences to emerge. And I looked at a bunch of these CLE offerings in some of the talks, and I think they highlighted these tensions and also provided attendees with practical solutions or practical tips on how to best take advantage of these generational shifts that we are seeing within the profession. So, and we'll just be talking to our guests about what they thought about the themes and how, you know, and how they see this generational differences playing out in the workforce, in the industry going forward.
Okay, let's do it. I'll go get Jessica Kramer. We'll be right back.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
State Bar of Wisconsin members have access to accidental death and dismemberment coverage that helps you financially plan for unexpected accidents. Acceptance is guaranteed. There are no medical questions. Coverage is issued by the Prudential Insurance Company of America. To learn more, visit wisbar.memberenroll.com.
Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up Podcast.
All right. Our first guest today is attorney Jessica Kramer.
Yes.
A partner with Kramer, Elkins, and Watt, LLC, based out in Madison, Wisconsin. Well, and she is also the chair of the substantive law track for this year's conference. Well,
Yes.
Happy to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Do we have our applause, our welcome thing?
Yeah.
There we go. I like that, Rob. Well, first things first, congrats on a very well done conference. I thought the substantive topics were quite apt. I looked through the times; it was always something that piqued my interest. So congratulations.
Thank you. I'm very happy. My co-chair Eric Ristow and I are very happy with the way it's turned out.
Okay. Well, could you tell our listeners just a little bit about you and your practice area and how you got involved with the solo small firm section?
So I've been practicing 19 years and formed my firm with my two partners about 8 years ago.
Okay.
And I've focused most of the time on representing landlords. So I do landlord-tenant law, but I exclusively represent landlords, so I always make sure people know that. I do not represent tenants, and I also do some commercial litigation. My partners do the litigation as well, and then we advise businesses. So usually when I'm involved in a conference or an event, it's frequently because of my expertise in landlord law. And one of our substantive topics this year was when a tenant files bankruptcy. So that was a lot of fun to talk about with experts in the bankruptcy area. I decided to get involved last year in the conference just because I had all these ideas that I needed to get out of my brain to somebody on topics that I've heard colleagues over the years talk about what they would really like to see. And so last year I helped out with the practice management track, I think it's called. But then this year, Sarah Clark at the State Bar asked me if I would co-chair the substantive law track, and I was happy to do it. And I mean, it was a lot of work, I'm not going to lie, sometimes hunting down speakers for their materials, but I'm happy to help. The people at the State Bar do so much work for these conferences, and I feel like the least I can do is volunteer a little bit of my time to help out.
I want to ask you just briefly about the theme for this year's conference. So it had a lot to do with generational, centered around generational gaps or divides or dynamics in the industry and in the law firm space, and how to utilize that to achieve the best outcomes for clients and for lawyers. How was that theme chosen? Do you know how?
I don't know if I know exactly how it was chosen, but I can tell you the discussions I was involved in, we talked a lot about, being in a profession that is very, traditional, if you will. Mm-hmm. And lawyers tend not to retire young, so there tend to be a lot of older lawyers, even as newer lawyers are coming in. And we wanted to attract more young lawyers to the conference. Mm-hmm. It's like they're the future of our practice, right? So not only attracting them here, but then making them feel like they're getting value out of what's here. And one thing that we did for that, other than some of the sessions themselves focusing on generational, issues and discussions, is new this year is each session is marked as being beginner, intermediate, advanced. beginner is not the word that's on there. I can't remember, but basically ideal for new lawyers. And that was actually my idea to do that, because I thought sometimes, you come to a conference, you see all the breakout sessions, and you're like, I don't know if this is going to be relevant to my practice, or I don't know if that's going to be over my head or not, or under, like too elementary. So we wanted to really mark those so that especially newer lawyers, or maybe people that aren't new but they're new to solo or small practice,
or to that area, that topic.
Yep, exactly. So they can decide, like, yes, I do kind of want the 101 of this area of law, or no, I want something more advanced. So I've heard some feedback that people have appreciated that the sessions are marked that way, so it helped them make their choices.
What tools or strategies would you recommend to newer lawyers when working with more experienced attorneys and vice versa?
That's a good question, and I'm thinking about some of the comments that came up during the Generation Gap plenary yesterday. And I think, everybody, is deserving of respect, right? I feel that you don't earn respect. You start with respect, and then you can lose the respect, right? So I think that every lawyer should treat, whether it's opposing counsel or someone that they're just working alongside, treat them with respect, regardless of age or experience level, because you want to be treated with respect, right? And don't be afraid to ask what you might think are the dumb questions. The vast majority of lawyers are actually nice people and willing to answer questions. And that's why, this conference is so great for that. I feel like there's something about being in person that makes it easier to just feel like you can just ask someone for advice, that's been practicing a little longer than you, or has practiced in an area that you don't practice in.
I agree.
It can be hard to pick up the phone or email or text or Snapchat or whatever the kids do these days. But don't be afraid to do that. And we do have the lawyer-to-lawyer directory the State Bar maintains, and I think new lawyers that don't know about that need to know about it. I'm in there for certain practice areas. I don't know if you are, but it's saying I'll give you 20 minutes of my time. Call me.
Can you explain quickly what the lawyer-to-lawyer directory is?
Yeah, so it used to be, in a book. Of course, I'm continuing to date myself, right? But now it's actually searchable online by practice area, and each Wisconsin lawyer can go in and just add their own name and say what practice areas they consider themselves, competent enough in and willing to give other lawyers advice on it. So, of course, there's the landlord-tenant law that I'm in there for, but then also appellate. I get some people calling me with appellate practice questions because a lot of lawyers, even if they litigate, they don't do appellate work. So, I appreciated having other lawyers that I could call when I was newer. So I'm trying to, return that and give back.
Absolutely. That's all it's all about. I didn't even know that existed, so I learned something new. I'll check if I'm on it. But I think this is where we ended, and I really love the quote. I think it surmises the epitome of the advice given to both, both sides of the generational gap. You don't earn respect. You start with respect, but you can lose it over time. I like that. that. I that's not a way I've ever thought about it, but I think that's spot on, and that's the way we should approach these generational dynamics.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
Put your trust in your premium with an insurance company that supports Wisconsin legal associations and events. Wilmick, insuring and supporting the Wisconsin legal community since 1986.
Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up Podcast.
Looks like you had a question you want to ask.
I had a question, and then I kind of lost it. But I think what I was going to ask is, when you said you started your firm with your two partners,
yes,
how did that come to be in terms of, did you go to law school with them and decide that that's what you wanted to do, or how did that come to fruition?
No, actually, we all worked as associates at another law firm together. That's how I met them. And we became friends. I actually, quite honestly, previously, I kind of had a rule where I didn't want to be friends with my coworkers. I wanted to have that separation, but we just really hit it off and we're friends. And the firm that we all worked at was not headed in the best direction for us, so we decided that we needed to leave. And it was actually Nick's idea for us to form our own firm. So after many discussions over beers. We Q was born. We call it Q for short. Was born, and now we have 2 associates. So that's great. One that
Congratulations.
thank you. Joe, who's been with us 4 years, and then Justin, who just joined us a couple of weeks ago. So it was, and we brought them both along to the conference too, so that everyone else could meet them.
And a plug for Q-Tips,
Yes.
which is the firm's blog, which is on the Whistlaw Now network of legal bloggers, for those who
Wow.
don't know.
You should probably trademark that.
Q-tips, I
Yeah.
know. And I do have to give Nick credit for that as well.
Yeah,
He
oh
came
man,
up
I
with
love
that.
this. You guys always are writing great stuff. When you first started your firm, and most of our listeners are young lawyers, what was the biggest challenge for you in starting the firm?
So I would say, the biggest challenge was just how scary the economics of it is, right? Starting your own business. We knew that we would need to take out a small business loan, so we did. That was the first thing that we made sure we could do, because we're like, we're not sure if this is going to work if we can't get a loan. And, obviously making sure you have enough clients. Now, we were kind of fortunate that way in that a good chunk of clients from the firm we were at did follow us. And I had already built a little bit of a landlord practice, so we kind of had that bread and butter area, if you will. But I think that what was challenging then and what remains challenging is just all of the administrative aspects of running a business, right? You know, Emil. And it's just, I like being in charge, if you will. I like kind of having the control of like, this is my business, and I, with my partners, we can run it in the way we want. But it's so much work, the part that isn't practicing law is just so much work. If I bill half of my time, I consider that a good week, because the other half is spent running the business.
Yeah.
You know.
So historically, have you always worked in a smaller firm context, or to give me a sense of your career prior to starting your law firm?
So I started, it's been mostly small firm, but right out of law school, I started at Murphy Desmond in Madison, which was a relatively large firm then. I would say it's more mid-sized now, but there were 55 attorneys when I worked there. And I worked there as a law clerk, and then they just hired me on. It was a really good place to start because I got to get some exposure to a couple different areas of law and determine whether I wanted to do litigation. And I determined that I did want to do litigation and had some really great mentors. In fact, this wasn't your question, but I'm just going to add this. One of my early mentors is Greg Seibold, and he now practices way up north, in fact, in the UP and northern Wisconsin, and I get to see him every year at this conference, and it's just great. And I like reminding him that, he was, my first big trial that I second chaired was with him, and I learned so much from him. And so, I'm very fortunate for the experience at the bigger firm to get a lot of that.
Yeah.
But I would never do it again. I love having and being a part of a small firm.
I was going to ask you that. And since you've had at least both experiences, why small law, and what calls out to you about it?
I think the relationships. I feel like it's the relationships with my partners and my employees just has a lot of depth to it. And when there are fewer people, you can focus more on the depth of the few relationships. It's kind of like, some people think it's better to have a few close friends than a ton of like acquaintances, right? And I sort of see it as being similar in the workplace, so it's an enjoyable environment because our relationships with each other have depth, but then also being able to form relationships with other small firms. Not that large firms and small firms can't and don't have relationships, but it's nice to network with and have referral partnerships with people who are like in the same exact boat as me, but just do a different area of law. We really understand each other.
Yeah, I've always felt that. I think there's a place for every sized firm, right? And I think larger firms are more well equipped in dealing with certain types of clients and certain types of matters versus smaller firms, right? And so, and being able to find those niches and that fit, in terms of the matter or the clients is very important. What are some common misconceptions that people may have about either starting a small firm or working at a small law firm?
I think one common misconception is that we have a general practice, that we do everything, or that we do the practice areas that serve primarily individuals. Like estate planning is the best example. We do not do any estate planning, and we don't want to. You know, there are plenty of capable solos and small firms that we refer to for that. And so we really have, basically, 4 core practice areas, and we stick with those. And we're pretty well known for those, especially for the landlord area of law. So I'm often having to kind of correct, I guess, maybe isn't the right word, but the misconception that we do everything, because we don't, and we don't want to.
When starting a firm, if there's something you could think back that you did or that your partners did that you could have done differently at that startup phase, what would that be?
I would say that we should have or could have gotten more involved in legal, in the state bar or other lawyer groups sooner. We are all very involved now. My partner Nick is on the Solo and Small Practice Board, section board. I'm involved with this conference. We're involved in the Dane County Bar Association and American Inns of Court, but we weren't doing any of that when we started our firm because we were just so focused on the basics, right? Like, we got to make sure that we keep the few clients we have, but meeting more lawyers sooner, I think probably would have revved up our practice a little faster. So that would be like my biggest tip to any attorney wanting to start a firm is, meet as many other lawyers as you can right away.
Well, I think that's a very important message. Get involved, people, and I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for all that you do. I don't know if you have any other questions.
No, I just wanted to say let's give it up for Jessica Kramer.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Just so our listeners know, we have Peter Kramer on the other side of the ones and twos with the sound effects, and he's going crazy with this.
It's Kramer with the extra E.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
Hi, Russell Nicolay here with Nicolay Law, Accident and Injury Lawyers. If you have clients that have been injured, my office would love the opportunity to help them get compensated and get their life back on track. We handle referrals and co-counsel relationships on injury cases all across Wisconsin.
Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up Podcast.
Okay, our next guest is Aiden Tharp, and she's in Hudson, Wisconsin.
That's correct.
Way up there, right?
Yes.
Okay. And what's the name of your firm?
Emerald Valley Law.
Okay. So we welcome Aiden. She is the co-chair of the Quality of Life and Ethics track here at the Solo and Small Firm Conference. Aiden, welcome. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we were talking with some of the other guests who are on their respective planning committees about, how some of the sessions were chosen. So when you were on the Quality of Life and Ethics Committee, what were some of the discussions about what's important to cover at this conference this year?
Well, our track, as you mentioned, is the Quality of Life and Ethics. So it does cover, I think, a really broad range of topics. So we're always trying to incorporate, things that relate to both of those, the ethics part of it. And so people want to get their ethics CLE is a huge part for attendees, I think, but also the quality of life aspect, and I think that can be really broad ranging, but this year, the last couple of years actually, we've been trying to get even a greater focus on attorney wellness, topics related to mental health, your mental emotional health and physical health, and incorporating that into your practice and trying to create, I guess, ways that those topics are relevant to attorneys so that they are interested in attending the sessions and could see themselves using it in their own practices.
Yeah. Well, and quality of life, work-life balance, lawyer wellness has been a big topic for this podcast, and we've gotten a lot of interest in those episodes where that is part of the discussion. So for you, tell us more about you and your practice and how you, what work-life balance looks like for you up in Hudson.
That word again.
I know.
Work-life balance. See, Emil doesn't like that. He doesn't like the work-life balance, but I don't know how else to say it. What is the substitute?
You're right. It gets at the idea, so we'll just stick with it.
It does. I agree. I don't really like that phrase anymore because it does feel like it's a constant struggle of actually creating a balance. But I went out as a solo just a couple years ago in 21. I'd been with a firm for a number of years, and I enjoyed my time there. I learned a lot. I think that work-life balance was part of what really led me to want to go solo, though.
What were you doing before that?
Family law, and similar to what areas I'm practicing now, but it was just in a small firm.
Okay.
I think I wanted to have more control over my schedule, my caseload a little bit more, and being a solo, and also it occurred during COVID. We were still working remotely. I think it was something I'd been thinking of for a number of years, but starting out working remotely during 2020 just kind of sped the process up for me, I think, a lot quicker than I'd planned. And so it was a little hectic, but I made that jump in early 2021. And as stressful as it was that very first year especially, I'm still really glad I did it. I love the independence and being able to create my firm and my practice the way I want it to be. So yes, I'm really glad I did it. I think it just, there was a lot to learn. I think there weren't as many resources available because of COVID through the bar for people making that leap at the time, or I didn't know about some of them, and I really wish I had availed myself of a lot more resources than I would know about now, but I know better, at least now too, when I'm talking to other people who might be thinking of doing that and some directions to point them in. But anyway, it was really stressful that first year. Just the admin and business side of it all, I think, got to be very overwhelming for me at times, while also managing, a substantive practice. But it's improved since then. I'm still really glad I did it, and I would do it differently the way I started it, but I'm still glad I did that. So
What would you do differently?
I think just used a lot more of the resources that I know are through the state bar. I know you were talking about your work even with helping people go solo. I think I didn't even know about it at the time. I probably would have been interested in a lot of things. I don't know what you offer.
It's just me just talking to people and meeting with them and giving them very practical advice on what to do and where to seek help. So it's just me talking primarily.
I'll be that.
Do we have to? All right. Okay.
That could have been helpful.
No, not talking
yeah,
shit, but just giving a very clear, non-pretentious advice or on what it takes. Because as you probably know, I never tell people, I don't advocate for people to just go solo. It takes a special type of person, because it's hard. It's not a very easy thing, and I don't downplay that as well. And it almost, especially if you're going to do this, you have to have a clear vision, and you have to be willing to pivot, and you have to be willing to take the detours around, So for example, from time to time, I'll meet with people who are about to go solo, and they're talking about, I want to do civil litigation or IP law or one of my favorite ones, I want to be a trademarks litigator. And I'm like, okay, but you're out of law school 2 years, you have no book of business, so you're going to keep the lights on first and shove whatever ideas of the lawyer you want to be. You got to put that in your back pocket, because first things first, you got to eat. So yes, you're going to take appointment cases, or you're going to go do some transactions law for small businesses, because those are the things you can easily get initially, and no knowledge is wasted. And so I just kind of, I demystify that. So if you're telling me you're out of law school to year one and you want to be a PI lawyer, and you think just putting a billboard up will just, you're delusional, or So I try to be that for it right, because in my own story, I knew I wanted to eventually get back to litigation. That's where I started. I was born to fight. I feel like starting law from 2 years out of law school, I just couldn't do that right away. So I decided to do some business law transactional work, because it was easier for me to work with closely held businesses and smaller businesses and build that trust and get some work in the door, keep my lights on, feed my family, then just jump into that. 3 to 4 years, I will then have the opportunity again to go back into what I wanted to do. So I just try to be pragmatic in the advice that I provide, and not just this idealistic, okay, yeah, great, you want to start your firm, now what? Some of the advice I give is just be lean. Like when you're a solo starting off, my clients didn't care if they were sitting on $1,000 Italian leather chair. So do you even need space starting off, right? Just very practical things like that.
And now, a word from our sponsors. In these uncertain economic times, the State Bar of Wisconsin wants to make sure that you and your practice have the best available tools. Ultimate Pass and Books Unbound are available for purchase using 6-month installment plans. Contact our customer service team at 1-800-728-7788 for more information. Would you like to implement new efficiencies into your law practice but don't know where to begin? Practice 411, the State Bar of Wisconsin's Law Office Management Assistance Program, is the place to start. Don't wait. Contact Practice 411 today for a complimentary and confidential consultation at 1-800-957-4670. Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up Podcast.
Yeah, I mean, that's very helpful because when I did graduate law school, I didn't even think about going solo. I think it wasn't even on my radar until almost 2019 or after I'd been practicing several years already. And I think probably that helped me more than if I was fresh out of law school and I didn't have clients or at least this prior experience. So I think that part did help me because I had clients I could keep working with when I did leave, and I wasn't starting from scratch to build up a client base, but it was more the learning the business side of it all that I was really a newbie at and didn't have any background. So I think there's I forget what it's called, but David Kreckler runs, I think, or he's part of it. There's a program through the State Bar to help, a whole day-long program about going solo. And
yeah, there is the CLE on that too as well. I think you can access it on Pinnacle.
I think so. I remember I've read about it. It sounded great. It's a whole day, and they do workshops and to help people be prepared to go solo. But I think it wasn't offered the year I was doing it because of COVID. Everything was shut down.
And prior to you opening your law firm, how long had you been a lawyer?
Since 2012, I took the bar. So,
Okay.
9 years actually when I went out on my own.
Okay.
So you took the bar exam? Did you go to law school? Where'd you go to law school?
Yes, I went out east, Temple University.
Oh, okay.
For law school, yeah. So then when I did move back, yes, I was.
So are you from the Hudson area, or?
Yes,
okay.
originally.
Okay.
Yep. So ended up back where I grew up, but then I wish I had gone to school in Madison and could have avoided the whole bar experience.
Yeah.
But
So how's it like practicing law in Hudson, which is a smaller city, and further north?
It's good. I like it a lot. I think we're considered more rural, certainly once we're north of Madison and Milwaukee and La Crosse. I had originally practiced actually a couple years in La Crosse for 3 years before I did move back up to St. Croix County. So that was a change, but I like where we live. We're really close to St. Paul and Minneapolis for just the city
An airport
benefits. Yes, definitely. And but we also have, a lot of access and easy access to nature and getting out into the woods, I think, and being able to just, have some of that rural life and benefits that people like too, in both ways, I think.
So as you know, we are currently dealing with a shortage of lawyers in rural parts of the state. If the powers that be are listening to you right now, which I hope they are, what advice would you give them as a potential solution in helping, or at least in improving or tackling that problem of the shortage of lawyers in rural areas?
I don't know, really. It is tough. I've read a lot and I've heard about the bar's initiatives, and I think they are really good and important, and I'm very glad there is the effort out there. I don't know the solutions because I think it is just a complicated thing, and maybe part of it comes down to people just not knowing what it's like up there and even experiencing the life up there for a while, and they just have this vision in their head of what it's like in a small northern town. And there are certainly, I think, there's reasons for stereotypes. There's certain cliches or things that I think are present in a lot of areas, but I think that's in any part of life, in city practices as well, or wherever people live. But it could just be people can't appreciate some of the benefits because they haven't experienced it yet.
Yeah, I was actually talking to someone at lunch today who he said, I think one of the solutions that should be
something we should try. Maybe solutions too strong a word. Something
not
we
solution,
can try.
Yes, something that we could try. I mean, we tried to do the bus tour, but he was saying people have to be more immersed in a community before they can decide that they want to live there. And so I don't know how you do that, but
The law schools need a satellite campus up north.
That's probably a really good idea, yeah. And then they have that opportunity to work with attorneys up there while even in school or as interns or
Yeah, because
law
if you think
clerks.
about it, right, at every law school in Wisconsin, from Marquette to Madison, right, there are people who come from different parts of the country who end up staying here and probably wouldn't have stayed and probably wouldn't have considered Madison or Milwaukee, but for the fact that they went to school and spent 3 years living in the area and got a very real or forced opportunity to experience and fall in love with the place.
Well, Nick, then because you're building those relationships while you're in law school and connections with people, and I think that's probably is a huge part of it, that then they stay because they already have those connections, and people just don't if you weren't from up north.
Right.
I mean, I was, so I knew what it was like, but I could easily see not wanting to live up there if I hadn't grown up there and didn't know what it was like or have family around. So it is tough, I think. I mean, and there's my area in particular, I feel like is a little different than even further north, like Washburn and Sawyer and Burnett County. I feel like there's a difference where I am just because of our proximity to the Twin Cities area. So I think it to me doesn't feel even quite as rural actually as once you go a little further north, and that's where I think they're really having the shortage. So I think that's even a tougher issue with getting attorneys up there. And I've gotten requests all the time also I know they need the private attorneys taking criminal defense cases up in like Bayfield and Ashland County, and it's all over up there. But yes, I think the immersion is a big part of it, having people being able to experience it a little deeper than just a visit, and then make some connections, or somehow without that living up there for a time makes connections with people and build some relationships.
yeah, absolutely.
How can you're the chair of the quality of life and ethics track for this conference, and your committee got to put on a bunch of really, really good CLE topics, from increase in attorney wellness at firms to just, I think one of the CLEs is titled "Just Say No." It's currently going on right now, so but I think you have a sense of what that is. One that piqued my interest was imposter syndrome. There's one on imposter syndrome. I'm going through these topics. What's your general takeaway on how law firms and solo attorneys can prioritize both, quality of life and ethical standards in their day-to-day work or practice?
You mean how can we mix?
Yeah, if you could give some advice, like
Mix
what would
those
you
in.
say? Yeah. Well, first, what does quality of life mean to you? What were you guys thinking about when you created that track?
Well, I didn't create it. It's been around for, I think, quite a while, but I just stepped in after many people before me. But I think, to me, it means, focusing on your life, not outside your practice, but your practice being a part of your life, but being able to enjoy all parts of your life, including your work, and to where your job is, we're attorneys, but doesn't become your entire life either, and isn't your sole focus, and all the stress and things that come along with that. But you have a sort of that work-life balance. But I think integrating it more into your personal life and aspects of that being able to help you in your professional life as well. And that's why some of the sessions are focused on, as I mentioned, attorney wellness. The imposter syndrome one was about self-confidence and managing stress levels as well. And even that was a great speaker. We had Maria Service. She's from Rochester, but she did in the session, she's giving us a lot of educational information and knowledge, but also had us do a little physical pause and a breath work. And I think and also in this last session I was just in on attorney wellness, we did a little bit of chair yoga at the end of it, and things like that I like a lot because I think it helps open attorneys up to an area that we don't typically focus on.
When was the last time you practiced chair yoga before the conference?
Probably never with chair yoga, yeah.
So from here on out, you will at least once a week do some chair yoga. What does that entail? Is that?
I mean, I've done regular yoga. I try to do that regularly, but the chair yoga is just a little more minimal version of more with your arms and breathing deep and some twisting and stretching. A lot of things you could do standing up, but if you weren't able to stay seated. But yes, I think it's, trying to focus on not just things like yoga or meditation, but that's a part of it, but trying to focus on our whole self as, our health and mental, emotional, and physical health as attorneys, that where the focus isn't just on how much are we billing and bringing in and earning and all of that, but keeping our wellness also as part of it.
And now, a word from our sponsors. Are you struggling with work-life balance issues? Could you use some help addressing these challenges? WSLAP offers confidential well-being support to lawyers, judges, and law students. With trained peer volunteers, structured well-being resources, and individualized support services, WSLAP aims to foster work-life balance within the Wisconsin legal community. Find us on the web at wisbar.org/WSLAP. Don't mind the dust. We've been remodeling the paralegal certification program here at the State Bar of Wisconsin. New requirements, new CLE options, and new ways to learn, all in a new format. For more information, contact our customer service team at 1-800-728-7788 and ask what the State Bar can do for you. Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up podcast.
So before we got on, we were talking about one of the CLE topics, and I thought the caption was very captivating, and it said, "Just say no," and it was on the wellness track. Obviously, the CLE is going on right now, but I'm sure you reviewed the materials. What was the idea behind that CLE topic?
Yes, that was, I think, to help people set some boundaries, learning ways to say no to clients, other attorneys, judges, when they're making demands on your time and wanting you to schedule certain things.
Did you tell our viewers, our listeners, to say no to judges?
I don't know if they're actually going to talk about that part of it, but that was an initial idea of when their
But it is important, though. It is important, and I'm glad you said that. So Joe and I were joking before the show started, and I said, it's so funny to me. I go to these wellness seminars for the industry, and oftentimes I'll find a couple of judges speaking at these things. And one time, there was a particular judge that was speaking and talking about wellness and stresses and all that stuff. And also happens to be a judge that tends to not give extensions very easily. And so I'm like, as a litigator, I'm like, you want to know one of the number one drivers of my stress factor? You know, and I just thought it was, but it's important, right? Because I also used that same concept in talking to other lawyers when we talk about wellness. I'm like, well, look into the mirror. Who are the causes? Who some of the biggest causes of stresses within the profession? I speak as a litigator, or other lawyers themselves. There's nothing more stressful than dealing with an unreasonable opposing counsel. And so before we talk about all the things that we can do and the chair yogas and all that stuff within our own daily practices, from being a judge to being a lawyer, are we imparting grace? Are we de-stressing or doing what we can to de-stress the profession, whether it be generously giving extensions out, or just being understanding and being human?
That's a good point. I think even with other attorneys too, where if someone's asking to reschedule something or they want an extension, and knowing that at some point it's going to come back to you, you're probably going to need it at some point too, and trying to give some of that grace, that if it's, you don't feel it's going to harm your client, of course, or it's
yeah, but even because I've had clients that are unreasonable and like, hey, opposing counsel just asked for 30 days, and yes, I have to. Sometimes you have to go back to your clients, whatever, and the client's like, well, absolutely not. I don't want this. And I've seen lawyers who come back to me and tell me, hey, I wanted to do this, but my client said no. And I'm like, no, it's your job to tell your client, chill out. Your case isn't going to trial for another year. A 30-day extension doesn't hurt.
Stop being unnecessarily combative. It doesn't change the posture of things. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean your claims are weak. No one's claims have magically gotten stronger.
Well, and I've also heard, we hear in these presentations with judges, if you're not giving that, you're not going to get it back. So when they need something, you may not be inclined to give on that point.
Well, I agree, but I also advise people this. I don't let others impact the level of baseline grace that I'm willing to give. So if you're a knucklehead on the other side and you don't give extensions, I wouldn't in turn do the same to you if it is my normal practice to do that, because that's just adding more toxicity into the whole profession, and it becomes very tit for tatty. And in the words of Wyclef Jean, they say two wrongs don't make it right.
Very true, yes.
Right? So, it's just, and then the just say no one. The story about that was I was at a restaurant a couple of weeks ago, and someone came up to me and asking for potential referrals for a divorce attorney. This individual was going through a divorce, which seemed to be messy. And I said, hey, here's my number. Remind me, and next day or whatever, and I'll let you know. And so I forgot to text that person back to say, hey, here are a list of referrals. And then after 2 days, I got a text message along the lines of, hey, you said you were going to send me a referral. You never did. And I'm just like, I don't even know you. You're not a paying client. Just met you, and I offered to help, and all of a sudden you're entitled to. I'm like, and I said in response, I'm like, I should have just said no, just to get back. And and I got a call. The person apologized, and I'm like, you're not entitled to that. But it's in our nature to want to help, right? How many people come up to you, hey, do you know this, and you want to help, even though you know it's going to be stressful. But I think sometimes we should say no.
I agree. I think, and that's a hard part of being maybe even more so with solos or small firm attorneys is, you're not taking every client that calls you or walks in the door either, but you
want to help them.
Right, yeah. And if, especially the area I am in family law, they call you, they have all these issues or stressful conflicts they're going through, and you might be the third one they've called and they can't reach someone else. So you really want to help them, but, you do have to also look at, I think, that situation, are they a good fit, but also just your own caseload, and
absolutely,
is it going to cause more stress to you, and then you ultimately aren't maybe a good help to them anyway. But it is hard. It's very hard to say no, I think.
Some practical advice for solo and small firms that are dealing with those calls or those requests for service and things they probably don't do, but they still want to help because they understand when individuals have to deal with the legal process, it could be confusing and tasking. I would recommend either a running sheet of the of referrals. We send folks to the LIRS, the State Bar's LIRS, and the Milwaukee Bar LIRS as just tailor-made answers. So that way, we're not adding additional work, but at least we're trying to point them into resources that could be of assistance. And so having a sheet like that could go a long way. So hey, I can't help you, but hey, I'm going to send you this. So you're reducing the commitments, because that's probably what I should have done. Like, hey, LIRS call, they'll figure it out for you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure having you here. Can we get a round of applause for Peter?
Aiden Tharp, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
I know what you're thinking. It was such a good one, and you don't want it to be over. I have good news for you. Part 2 of this podcast is coming in November. In Part 2, we talk with Aaron Ogden and Brent Haft. These are practice management and technology gurus, both of them. Brent, in fact, is the new practice management advisor at the State Bar of Wisconsin. One of the things that he talked about recently is that a lot of solo and small firm attorneys don't know that the program even exists. It's a member benefit. You just call up or email Brent, and he gives you advice on practice management and technology issues. If you want to learn more about the State Bar of Wisconsin's Law Office Management Assistance Program, go to WSBAR. Once you get to wisbar.org, go to the tab for members and scroll down to Practice 411. Click on that, and you'll learn more about the resources offered by that program. See you next time, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. If you have a topic you'd like us to explore, let us know. I'm your host, Emil Ovviagele, and we'll catch you next time.